This is about Denmark, everything I love about it, and maybe some of what I hate about Denmark, but mostly all the things I romanticize and really like and support and love about this place and country and this area in the world. It's, uh, it's the land of the free, of the free Vikings. It's the land of these very proud people who hold together and keep their culture, language, and common understanding on a very high level so that they can go out and face the world and the troubles in it. It's the land of a people that, in many ways, have gotten a superiority in their physical forms and the beauty in their light-headed and blue eyes, and has gotten a unique language and special way of interpreting how to live. It all goes back several thousand years ago, but especially to Estonia, where the Danish flag fell down from heaven, as the myth is told, and the bishop on his knees praying heaven and God, Eskilsen, praying God to give victory to the Danes, and so they got it, and back they went, victorious and proud, and their name resounded many places to the east and the west, and people knew that they were the Danes. And it's the country of the big farming land and the beautiful, majestic forests and the harmony of nature and people. And it's a culture that has been breeding the same maybe ideas and people for 1,000 years. The trust in the king, the country, and God, king, and the country. And even though we live in a democratic, ideal period, these values didn't disappear at all. That's why Denmark didn't become a republic but a monarchy. But it was close of shifting the monarchy totally out with total different ways of the republic. Anyhow, they kept that balance and gained the strength in language, culture, and the way of tightening their lines, understanding each other, and facing the world together. So these are the Danes I came to live among. I, the small, short, dark-headed Middle Eastern man, looking more than looking more to them like a dwarf than a real normal, well-grown person. And the things I really love about Denmark is there is, as they say, very short to the roof. They know where they have their homes and what they will tolerate. And if they don't like things, you will not be welcome. It's not a culture of fake faces where you can get a smile one day and then get a stab the other. It's just if they don't feel safe and secure by you, you will not be welcome and they will not relate to you. It's also the land where the knights had fought and the people had supported uh, to cherish the victories of history and the land. It's a country that kept its eyes open to development and changes, and always looked at what they could, what they could show of value to the world, and what value they could bring together along with them to life. So there are traces all the way back from the Vikings having from Denmark, also of course Norway and Sweden, but that was also Danish territory most of that time in the old days. Much of it anyway in the south, the cultivated part in the Kalmar Union, where the Queen Margrethe I had her reign, and a very tough one. And so it's also a struggling people of very simple farmers and people who understand their position in the world, but also a people that is close to each other and where the kings never get so high that they forget the people, and the people never get so rebellious that they wanna they want to turn against the rulers. It's about finding and keeping that harmony and making the changes from within. That's all that I loved from the history of the old days. And it's the country that has bred some very brave and foolish heroes that went on trying to change the life of the people during time. And I love it from the modern days for its ways of life. At times when I came here, it was a greater relaxation and a big trust. The people were homogeneous and had developed this hard-working society that at the same time felt that it had a responsibility to the world, and then also accepted refugees and people from other places, but in small amounts, in order to keep the balance, because they were aware that that cultures can give inner tensions, and they want to help, but they want to help so they don't drown themselves. And that's a beautiful way of looking at things. It's the country where I came to as a child, and can see a lot of value in the hardworking and goal-oriented people. It's also the country where people can feel free either to sit in a temple or go to the seashore and take a bath naked. So it's an open, wide culture that came to the Danish society the last 150 years, that had shaped it in a new formula, but built on the old one. And that very old formula of looking 1,000 years back is very random today. How many countries and places can look back and say, well, I have had a kingdom of 1,000 years, and it hasn't really been broken. There have been several times where they have allied with nations and participated in wars and were invaded a little bit, especially by the Germans, and a little bit by both the British and especially the Swedes. But most of the time they kept their sovereignty and entity. And the only time where this country has been overrated totally was during World War II. And that also made a shift in the country, of course, in many ways, but that also brought to light their inner love for peace. I remember some of my Danish elderly friends telling me about their parents and grandparents fighting in those wars. And they said they were forced to go into some entities, and they didn't want to shoot at the enemy. They shot in the skies, and they tried not hitting the target. So this very big awareness of that importance of human life and humanism was a real thing and is a real thing in Denmark. It's a country that through 40 years of international work and support had brought itself to a high place of humanitarian and relief aid. And of course it brought itself in many ways also in political measures into the international community. It has been a nation that followed the old nations on the embargo of overtaking islands and being a colonizer. So it was maybe the fifth or the sixth nation in the times of the colonization in the 1700s that embarked on these journeys to get in contact with the world and to colonize it as they saw it from that perspective. And that's where Greenland got colonized as well. And the tides were put very, very close together at that point in time. It's also a nation that, despite secularism and atheism today, still holds on to that carpet of Christianity that's beneath society, and the idea of it's a country with maybe one of the top level priest and church educator. It's like churches are everywhere, and the priests, the educators in the church are as many as the church, and maybe sometimes even more. It's a nation that also have realized that everything can be solved by a kind of talk and dialogue. and conversation, and to be realistic, not to fight where there is no hope in fighting or where the damage could be stronger, but at the same time to show the bravery to stand up to sea attacks and land attacks and building fences and building walls. And many times the Danes themselves, they tell me that our ancestors just felt lucky. It was a country that could have been overrated by everything and anyone, but something mentally and in their history and in their way of cooperating made it impossible for anyone to run them over. So it's their way of surviving hard times, being a small country. At one time, Denmark was actually a large country with Norway and big parts of Sweden and east of Europe, um, part of northern Poland and some areas belonging to Germany today, the Holstein Schleswig and some areas to the west as well. So uh, Denmark has been huge, and then it's shrunk into this small country. So it had to also look back at its identity and face the situation in the world as an entity that doesn't have mountains but have ideas and strength that is better than mountains, and that's keeping keeping to the close to the soil and understanding the realities and facing them with uh, with a stoic mentality. And talking about the stoic mentality, that's something that's very widespread among the Danes. You can feel and see the difference between them, the coolness they speak about in the Nordic people and the British people. They're standing on fire and saying, "Oh, well, the building is on fire, and maybe I'm losing everything." So keeping calm in all kind of situations is also a trait I found in the Danish people. Um, they are also many times aware of their special uniqueness, especially when we came as refugees. People came all the way back from the 30s, 40s, the Polak and the Jews, and then you had you had different communities from North Africa and Latin America, and then later in the 70s came the bigger waves of people from Iran, Iraq, and Turkey and Pakistan and different small areas, India, of course, and small areas beyond that. And I think many I've talked to at that time had or can recall their parents' times. I can say that um, that they felt that this is a very proud nation and very clean nation, and they just to work for their country and how it functions was more than a duty. It was a kind of part of their belief that keeping keeping the society clean and keep it together and taking care of everything is a big duty and importance. That's what keeps us together. And then you could sometimes get lost in Denmark between the politicians and the monarchy, because who is ruling what? And then you start to realize that the respect for the monarch is deep and they are very loved and liked among the people, even those who doesn't want and doesn't like the monarchy. They understand their value, and they understand that's part of the nation. Not everyone, of course, but in general terms. So this very lovable queen who had been reigning, and her father before on the white horse during World War II, riding the streets, showing the people that he is there. That's beautiful and very touching figures for many Danes. And at the same time, the political system running beside it, but always going to get the blessings of the queen whenever they have a change in ministers and orienting the king and about what's going on in politics and foreign policy and all that. And so it's a country that is tight and close and understand each other and the morals of work and the Lithuanian way of worshiping God by working, not just by sitting in the church or the monastery. So you don't find all that many people uh, isolating themselves in monasteries. They isolate themselves in a different way, because another trait about the Danes I found is that they like their privacy very, very much, and they don't like invaders, and I mean guests. Um, they are really not that open-hearted to guests all the time and strangers from the street. They like to keep their entities close and their barrier close, and it takes a long time for a Dane to open up and become friends with you. The same goes for the Norwegian people. They have the same traits here, and perhaps also the Swede, and especially up far north, that it's not an easy task. It's not a warm-hearted and open-hearted people. And the writer Holberg tried also to describe part of the Danes and saying that they were like that, closed-minded and minded their own business, and they didn't like interfering in others' affairs or getting interfered into. At the same time, they kept their family and close ones very, very close, and were ready to help and be there for them. And sometimes you can feel they're a romantic people just beneath the surface, especially the youth who can just be free of worrying in some paces of history anyhow. So when you imagine these girls with long legs on these bicycles, just riding a tour out in nature or in the city, and just being so relaxed about it, as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. It's also people that takes care of its health and tries to always look at what's most beneficial for the body, and keeping that temple very sacred and very strong is a trait that they have also inherited from ancestors and other times. The Danes hasn't always been those tall people. Maybe they got this trait from Germany and maybe through World War II as well. And that's also where some German elements started affecting the Danes in their DNA, because up to 1850s and maybe later than that, many Danes weren't that tall. They were shorter, and there have been times with big poverty in Denmark and great need, and where people had to stick together in small communities. And so religion has played a big role, the spirituality of religion anyhow, the chanting and the songs and the deep belief underneath the surface. And you can meet a Dane today whom seem like an atheist, but has big respect for people, in a way from people in his community that are Christians, and only a few will be so open mouthed to say bad words about them. That doesn't mean the Danes doesn't say bad words. They do that all the time, but just in private or when they get a little bit drunk. And that's another trait of the Danes, the way they party. It's like times has changed a lot for them, and they were very careful not to drink in the past, and had all these rules about closing Sundays and being with family and going to church and doing charity, and that changed a lot from just 2 generations ago. So they became the most drinking people in the European nations, as measured by some elements, measured by some social studies, and they became more fierce in the way they both party and go around saying words and talks. So that has changed, but you can feel they are a lot shy, and they are easygoing, and that's a beautiful trait that people really like. And they have developed a cuisine that they didn't have before, because when times of tourism started coming in, and art and beauty and design, and we can see also Her Majesty the Queen had a lot of interest in showing her taste for food and taste for design and clothing, and she had some paintings and worked on different issues that the people also liked and shared with her. There are elites in Denmark, and there are people above others, but the strange thing is that people just feel satisfied with what they got. It's like a trait they have inherited, that that you are there where God put you on earth, and you stick to your work and what's good for you, and you don't let your eyes run to some people who have a lot more because, well, they have a lot more burden to take care of as well. Never wish to be in other man's shoes. These are some of the ideas that I caught up with in the Danish way. And so you just take care of what's your own and where you're put. If it's a kind of work, you do it very good, diligently, and with a great care. And if you have more, that means you have greater responsibility. And with greater powers comes greater responsibilities towards the people and towards the king and God and the country. So living and growing up in this country has many sides to it, as in every other place at the same time. And I was just focusing on the very beautiful and nice things I liked about Denmark. They would leave you alone and maybe never ask you about your culture or background if you didn't open up to talk about it. And they wouldn't talk about their private life either before you become friends. And most time you become friends over a beer or a drink or somewhere where people can open up and talk and feel that warmness, because the cold surface has to be warmed by something, and that's where the beer and the wine comes in. And it's a very striking thing in the Danish population, how much the love for the Danish brewed beer, of course, is great, and how they get the nourishment from it more than water itself. And that's, of course, another taste of life and way of life they have. And so they have also developed a social care system where they take care of the poor and needy, so they are not left behind like in the old Spartan communities or German right-wing thoughts that weakness is just to be gotten rid of. It's only the beautiful and the nice. And despite that, taking care of these people, it's also a way of shoveling out of the way, because most of the time you only see people with more perfect traits. That's allowed. So they also have this kind of view or idea that if you are not born in a good and perfect shape, that means you have some troubles and you're lacking what is needed. And at the same time, there are the other view that taking care of the needy, and that they could have some powers and traits in them that could be very useful, is also part of what defines the Danish culture. The woman in the Danish culture has had a big role to play, and I think, as I can read it in history, that goes far back. It's the big ideals from the older times, and the woman that had been beside their Viking men, or later the kings. And so the woman is very important. She's like the one who keeps the family together, and she shows that strength, and the man really adhere to her, especially in modern times. And in modern times, after especially feminism, we get more of this picture that it's a woman's society, and men are like womanized and womanish in a way, and going over to succumbing to the woman's side. And that's why they need the alternative way of life as well, to show it as men when they go to the bar or the sports, or go fighting on the land, or becoming soldiers and something like that. There is also sometimes that I can feel a very, very deep sense of irritation in the Danes. You can feel it just beneath the surface. It's like they're most of the time has some electric current running into their hearts and minds. They are not always at ease. They can quickly feel irritated and rejecting and closed, and they can seem a little hard also in their way of communicating. But at the same time, you can also feel, if you get through that hard shell, that you become part of the group, and then you are in. So they keep much to that, in a way, feudal way of thinking, and at the same time, a kind of tribal way of thinking. So basically, up until now, Denmark has been a tribe that has always made it through because they could recognize each other in language and way of speak and their thoughts, and they distrust foreigners very much, especially people with very different culture. So it's a mix of their um, uh, inheritance from the Vikings and the Christian inheritance that also shape their view and their values and makes them look at people from other places in a different lens. At the same time, they can be very good-hearted and really wanting to do something for someone else and never thinking about war or fighting. They are peace-loving. Really, many Danes can be very peace-loving and loving. Just everyone takes care of himself and let's get on in this life instead of all this fighting. And there are people in need who needs us, and we have been we've been blessed with a lot of uh, good measures of wealth and prosperity, and we should share that with the world. That's also a philosophy and a way of thinking that is deep rooted in the Danish, as I have known it, and as I have lived it with them. And so you can also face hard times with the Danes because it's not easy to get into their group, and it's not easy to become part of Denmark or one of them, even though you speak the tongue very fluently and even though you share the culture. So sometimes it's not about going kissing asses or buttering, as they say, um, um, to get that influence or to show that you are likable. It's about showing who you are and just hoping that they like you. So it's many times like not logical. It's just maybe a kind of intuitive or impulsive way of dealing with people, or maybe there is one who shelters you or helps you, and then you are under the protection of someone, and the rest will respect it, even though they don't like it. So it's very much as we could maybe imagine from the Viking times, of a fugitive who got under the protection of one strong man in the group, and the rest will just respect that, and even though they don't like it and they don't want to deal with that man or something. But with time, they call them blue-eyed because in time they also start to understand that maybe they have been too hard on somebody else, and that brings them to a kind of a very very like deep felt touch of consciousness. They become warm-hearted towards other people. And there are nations the Danes like more than others, of course. They feel a lot of commonality with the British. They really like the British, and they feel much more like bound historically and culturally with the Norwegians and somewhat with the Swedes, but because of the fighting with the Swedes, they can sometimes like to beat them. But today it's like beating them in football and in handball and these sports. So the sports fill a lot for the Danes because they have these um, like the way you can get your power and energy out and show your foe that you are the strongest and you have the biggest and strongest mentality and physically adjusted body. And so it's become the norm like that. And most of the time they like also some of the other European countries. Some of them are very affected by the Germans. Others don't like the Germans and the German ways, but look further south towards especially France, whom they had a good relationship in the past, and some have Polish roots, so that's usually also where some of them would look. But mostly they define themselves as this special entity, and I find there are five type of Danish people. There are the very sophisticated ones, and then there are the workers, and then I find the people who are good at trade, and there are and then there are the leftovers, the rest, a rest group of people who are failures in their own life but are hiding within this strong tribe. And then there is the fifth group, and that's the more like tribalish kind of what can you say? They are just more part of the tribe than being part of Denmark. And so you have different layers, and that's what puts society together and makes it very, very safe. And the safety and the prosperity comes from that understanding that we do not fight among each other in a way that's destructive, and one party has to give way to the others if they lose or they don't win. And whenever you lose, you just turn around. You do not get back and try to tip the whole society. You keep loyal, and that deep loyalty that have been taught, that has kept the Danish society together as well. They are also animal loving. They really, from the farming times, like their animals a lot. Not only the pigs, but also the cows and the horses, the cats and the dogs especially. But they also had relation in farming, with, to take care of the hens and take care of the geese and make way for that. And that's why you find a lot of interest in nature and biology and how it works and the ways you can take care of it. So the Danish people are also very, very interested in staying close to nature and being in touch with it at all times and not forgetting it, and making excursions out of towns after they grew too big. That doesn't mean they didn't have periods of big trouble, like we hear about Copenhagen in the old days, how the roads were sewers and how people could get drunk and lose all their money and their family had nothing left, and a woman could die because nobody took care of her and her son would be homeless, and how the rich didn't care for the poor. That's part of Denmark as well, and there are dark histories about these issues. Otherwise, H.C. Andersen wouldn't have written his beautiful stories. They are also taken out of reality, the harsh reality of some people, as usual, always putting themselves above others and not caring. But beneath it all, you can find that spirit of what I call Christianity and Lutheranism, and the way that no one is above the law, and that both king and priest are just humans who are just reflecting a position and not being out of reach from the people, and keeping those values has been helpful to the Danish society to give it rest and a sense of inclusion, so they could go about their business knowing that everybody is working for the society, and if somebody isn't and they get caught, they will be punished severely and put out of office, and they will be they have a good way of looking into people's way of cheating. Like transparency is held very high in Denmark still, and they have learned these lessons from history that transparency is very important, and keeping the people with power in a kind of a relation, so they don't run away from their responsibilities, always having the feeling for the country. That's a strong thing, the sense of nationalism and culturalism, and that has defined also how Denmark really gets through. So everyone in Denmark loves Denmark, mostly, because it's a place where you can feel safe and you can feel secure, and you can get a way of life, and perhaps you're lucky you get into the group and you become part of it and they trust you fully, and perhaps you don't. But there is also, despite their harshness, a kind of mercy and understanding, and they can relate, especially if you haven't done anything wrong but just are different. And as I said, it's a woman's society, but it's also a society that has these masculine values in it, of honor and not so much bravery in the traditional sense, but a bravery in just being and yourself and sticking to that, and not trying to hide behind something else. And that brings respect in the Danish in the Danish mentality and opinion. It's also a place where the sky mostly is gray, and it rains a lot, and the sunny days are fewer than other places, but still a lot of sunny days. So the Danish people has also learned to appreciate how it is to be uh, under a sky, an open sky and an open land with very, very little hills and no mountains. That also shapes the mentality and how you go about your land. And knowing that the sky is mostly gray most of the time, but it can also become very, very beautifully blue above the green grass. That gives the Danes many days where they celebrate and love attaching to that nature and just loving being in it, relaxing, not thinking of anything, and not concerning themselves with other than what is their responsibilities and duties. And so that attachment to the country and the nature has brought the Danes as a community close together and made them a nation that gives way for intervention and invention and trade and travel and people with imagination that can flourish and write stories because it's safe and it's most of the time something you can develop. I'm not saying it's easy. We know from the story of H.C. Andersen, H.C. Andersen, how he struggled in his youth because his mom was from this feudal low class and she was a bit mistreated, and he took these trips to Copenhagen and were rejected many times before he got accepted. So it's not an easy society, but it's like there are different type of societies in Denmark, some whom have taken reign and power and sits above the ordinary people, and then there are these farmers in the lands, and then we got this new politician and bureaucrat layer of people and communality workers who get very good salaries for doing so. And that's one of the things in Denmark that had changed a lot, that the high rate of taxes and how it impacts society, because the state has grown so big that it controls almost everything, but still giving way to private businesses, especially big ones or successful ones, who can get special treatments in many ways, because they flourish and they make others flourish, and they will pay the taxes and help the people who doesn't have to have enough. And so we are in a society that has shifted from poverty on the street to giving people big help and security, so they stay out of the rain and the cold. This is a romantic view I have been putting forward about how I see the Danish society and the way it works in several ways. And I know there is the other side, the cynical and more realistic, as people call it, of Denmark. And there are traits I hate about it. And, well, the video have become too long, but basically it's a kind of racism and tribalism that everyone gets in touch with the Danish people can feel at one point or another. And it's a kind of, we are the better, make you feel that way. And sticking to each other. I remember a Frenchman telling me once, I met him, he said, well, I can talk, he's a beautiful, handsome Frenchman, a guide and a tour guide and a nice person. But he says, what is it with these Danish people and girls? They always sit together, talk together, and are dissatisfied with everyone else. I told him, even you, the Frenchman. He said, yes, it's difficult to get through to them. I can much easier get through to any other kind of girls than these Danish girls. So that can be a trait in the Danes, that they make you always feel they are superior, and you should never think anything about yourself. They use this law of not importance. Nobody is important, and nobody should speak about his importance or how good he is. No one is good enough, and especially not you, who's not belonging to the place. And they don't say it like that, but you can be the duck, you can be the duck duckling, the black duckling, and the one who doesn't belong and fit into the mainstream of who they are, and that makes life sometimes difficult, and also among themselves, where there is this exclusion, and that happens a lot in schools, especially during the last 50, 60 years, where more and more kids can say, I feel outside and I feel not welcome and not wanted, and the others see me as not normal. And so society has been struggling with these hardcore you are not good enough issues. And it has sometimes also put a blockade in the face of many people who were innovative, or could have brought themselves to higher levels of innovation and cleverness. And that's why you see it growing in alternative communities, like people from Jewish communities studying in Denmark getting the support to do that from their own communities, or some Danes who are just breaking all rules and going their own ways. For many people, that you're not good enough and fall in line, and all the straws should be just as high as each other. That has given the country also a kind of, in my eyes, a special way of stagnation, and where people sometimes can be put down, even though they can accelerate and can show special talent or ability. So that has also infected the Danish society from time to time. And then that hidden tribalism and racism in the hearts, that they just don't like foreigners. They don't want to help them. They want them here. They don't want to see them. And many people having their own trouble with alcoholism and different other practices that makes life hard, or because life seems hard, they go into that. So there are people with anger in their hearts, and as I said, that negative electricity they always show you all the time, and you can feel it in the faces and in the eyes, and they can really be mean, as they say, really mean in the ways they do things. And I've witnessed some of these things where they could be mean to someone, and then someone steps up against them from their own communities. They stop it. You're being too mean, and they listen to each other because they feel equal, or maybe they feel that they were doing wrong. And so this only us society and meanness to others is also part of Denmark, unfortunately, and it's strong, but nobody's talking so much about it. But sometimes people mention it in groups, or when they are alone, or when they can speak more freely, or when they have thought things through. And that's because that meanness, it stops at a certain level, or it doesn't get there where you lose your salary and money, and you cannot get along, because that would make a revolution from people, and that will bring killings in the street and all that, because people wouldn't accept it. But it stops at a certain level of exclusion and isolation and not welcoming, and it takes a long time even for people they like to feel at the same level as the Dane and feel welcome and feel at home. And sometimes it's some of the negative traits in the Danes is also they have this minority inferior complex, because they are a small country amongst bigger countries, and they have to compete with huge numbers of people from the other countries in sports and in economy and trade, and they feel they are doing well, and so they feel superior all of a sudden. And that gives them that feeling that, well, you're not good enough, not good as we are, and not letting people in that way is also, and only doing it because of interests. That's also part of what characterizes the community, and they like to speak behind people's back. They like what they say called the chatter at dinner tables and in private communities, when you are not hearing them, or when they feel secure and among people they trust. They can show their negative side or negative speak about someone and what they really feel about this or that person, and that's how they do it and go about doing it, so they don't have to fight in the open street, and so they don't have, when they meet each other, to go at each other's throats. But then they can keep a kind of neutral attitude, or an attitude of forced respect by the law. And some of the things said about the Danes is also that they can be cheaters when they know they can get away with it and nobody will find out. They are also big cheaters in that manner, and try to cheat maybe the from the taxes and from other stuff, but it's never under loop in the same way as it is when it's a foreigner doing it in their country. Then they feel that they are being misused and all that, and things are being blown up, as they say. That talks to the inner swinehound, and the mentality of just disliking everybody else. So unfortunately, these are also negative traits that Denmark has with it in its identity, despite all the very, very good things. And that's how it is all over the world. There are negative traits, and well, if you don't like the smell in the bakery, you can go and live somewhere else. That's what they tell you, and that's how the saying goes, and that's how the world is. If you are not able to push back and to show your worth, and you can do something in society and get on, then you have to go somewhere else. And maybe they prefer everybody going somewhere else so they can be left in their little paradise and keep the world shut out of everything they like and love. But the world is getting closer and is already here, and they have to deal with it. And that made a big change the last maybe 20 years in Denmark, from a homogeneous to a more polygeneous culture of many subcultures, and understanding that these subcultures has always existed, but now they become more clear because people are from different ethnicities and cultural orientation. So we will see where it goes, depending on how the world is moving as well. And so the Danes are a very great and strong nation who have showed they can be part of the world and the winning world as well, and they can keep their country and homeland together and free from fighting and quarrels that shuts it down. And they have a special feeling about themselves that makes them feel very special if you compare them to other people. And they have certain ways of doing things and not doing things that also are traits in their way of life. And I don't know why I've spoken so long about this. Maybe it's because I needed to. And so this is what it is, the traits of the Danes as I see it, and how it shifted in a very disorganized way, and the free association. Yeah, thank you, Denmark, for everything, and I love the good parts of you, even though I hate the worst ones, and hope to gain the benefits of your goods as well.